I've often wondered if memories have a scent, because every time it rains, I can smell that same spring morning, the one that started everything. It's strange how a moment, one heartbeat in time, can change the entire course of your life. I was young then, too young to understand that love, once chosen, never leaves you. It only buries itself deeper, like roots searching for a home in the dark. That morning, I walked through our small garden behind the Parker house. The roses were still wet from dawn's dew, their petals trembling as if afraid of the light. My mother, Margaret, was hanging laundry nearby, her hands moving like a rhythm she'd repeated her whole life. "Evelyn," she said, "don't stay out too long. The neighbors talk." The neighbors always talked. In that little town, silence had value, and dreams were considered dangerous. My father, Thomas, believed in rules more than in faith. He loved order, not freedom. Every evening, he would sit by the fire, polish his boots, and talk about duty and reputation, as if those were the only things worth living for. And maybe for him, they were. But I wanted something else, something beyond the fences, the prayers, and the polite smiles at Sunday service. I wanted the world. I wanted love. And then, one ordinary afternoon, love arrived. I still remember the sound before I saw him. The sputtering of an old car engine by the gas station at the edge of town. I was carrying a basket of apples from the market when I noticed him, a tall man in a gray shirt, sleeves rolled up, wiping grease off his hands. He looked up, smiled, and asked, "You wouldn't happen to know where I can find the mill road, would you?" His voice was warm, a little unsure, like he was afraid to disturb the peace of the place. That was Daniel Parker, and that was the beginning. We talked for less than 10 minutes that day, but somehow, it felt like I'd known him all my life. He spoke about cities and seaports, about roads that stretched so far they seemed to never end. I remember the way his eyes lit up when he talked about music, about jazz, something I'd never even heard before. "You should see the world someday," he told me. "It's bigger than you think." And just like that, he became my world. Weeks turned into months. Daniel stayed in town longer than he planned. He'd visit my father's workshop under the excuse of helping him with carpentry. Though I knew the truth, he just wanted to see me. We met in secret, beneath the willow tree by the lake. There, the world didn't judge us. We'd talk for hours, sharing dreams, fears, and promises that felt eternal. I told him I wanted to paint again, that I'd given it up because my mother thought it was useless. He laughed and said, "Then paint something useless every day." That line stayed with me all my life. He had a way of making the impossible sound simple. But life never forgets to remind you of your place. One evening, I saw him standing by the lake, a letter in his hand. He looked different, quieter. He said he had to leave, just for a while, to sort things out back home. "Just trust me, Evelyn," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I'll come back for you." And I did. I waited. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, but he never came. At first I told myself he was delayed, or sick, or searching for the courage to return. But deep down, I knew. The silence had already said what words couldn't. People started whispering. I became the girl who'd trusted to isolate. My mother avoided my eyes. My father's disappointment became a quiet storm in the house. And every night, I'd sit by the window, watching the road, waiting for headlights that never appeared. Then one morning, I saw her, a woman standing at our gate, elegant, graceful, with sadness in her eyes that felt like a mirror. She introduced herself softly. "I'm Olivia Miller, Daniel's wife." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands went cold. She wasn't cruel. In fact, her voice trembled with kindness. "He told me about you," she said, "and I just needed to see the person he couldn't forget." It was strange. I should have hated her, resented her, but I didn't. I pitied her. Maybe because she carried the same wound I did. The difference was, she got to keep him, or so I thought. She left without saying another word, her eyes full of questions that would never find answers. That day, something inside me broke quietly. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stopped hoping. Love, I realized, isn't always about holding on. Sometimes, it's about learning how to let go without losing yourself completely. Years passed. Seasons changed. My youth faded quietly like a song no one remembers the lyrics to. But sometimes, when the wind brushed past the curtains, I could swear it carried his scent. Sometimes, in dreams, I'd see him standing by that willow tree, smiling, calling my name. I'd wake up crying, pretending it was just the rain. Then one day, decades later, a letter arrived, old, yellow, folded as if it had traveled through time itself. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. It was from Daniel. He wrote about regret, about choices, about how he'd thought of me every autumn. He said he'd named his son after my father, Thomas, because he wanted to remember the man who raised the woman I loved. I couldn't decide if that was cruel or beautiful. I read that letter 100 times. I kept it inside my Bible, between pages that spoke of forgiveness, and every time I touched it, I remembered how his voice sounded when he said my name. People say time heals everything. They lie. Time only teaches you how to live with the ache. But last winter, something happened that time could not prepare me for. It was a knock. I held that letter for hours before daring to open it. It sat on the table, the flame from the fireplace flickering against the red wax seal. My fingers trembled. Part of me wanted to throw it into the fire, to let it burn, to let the past finally dissolve into smoke. But another part of me, the part that still carried the scent of that spring afternoon in my heart, needed to know. Because sometimes, knowing, no matter how much it hurts, is the only way to live again. When I finally broke the seal, the wax cracked like an echo from another lifetime. Inside was a folded sheet, its edges worn, the ink slightly faded, as if it had waited too long to be read. It began, simply, "Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't find the courage to say these words in person. I hope you can forgive me for that." His handwriting was shaky but familiar, that same mix of strength and gentleness I remembered. As I read further, my eyes blurred with tears. "There's something I never told you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't trust myself. You deserve to know the truth about why I left, and what really kept me from coming back." I paused, my chest tightened, my heart whispered, "Don't read this, Evelyn, let the past stay buried." But I kept going. "When I met you, I was already promised to another Olivia. It wasn't love at first, only duty. My father had fallen ill, and the family business depended on her family's support. I told myself it was the right thing to marry her, to save everyone else from ruin. But then I met you, and for the first time, I questioned what right really meant. The words sank into me like rain into dry earth. All these years, I had thought he'd simply chosen her, that I wasn't enough. But now, I realized, he'd been trapped. I tried to walk away, Evelyn, I truly did, but every time I packed my bags, my father would get worse. The doctors would say he wouldn't make it through another season. So I stayed, and by the time he passed, it was too late. Olivia knew. She knew about you. But she never hated you. She pitied me. I stopped reading. My breath came in shallow waves. Olivia knew. All those years ago, when she stood at my gate, she already knew everything. Yet she came with grace, not anger. That memory replayed in my mind like an old film reel, flickering in silence. I turned the page. Evelyn, the day I left town, I didn't go home. I drove to the lake, to our tree. I waited there for hours, hoping you'd appear one last time so I could tell you the truth. But you never came. Maybe it's better that way. You got to keep me as I was, not as what I became. My tears fell onto the page, blurring the ink. I pressed my hand against the words as if I could still feel his pulse through them. When I finally returned years later, you were gone. I heard you'd moved to your aunt's place by the coast. I tried to find you once, but by then, I had a son, Thomas. I told him stories about you. He thought you were a character from one of my novels. Maybe in a way, you were my unfinished chapter. I leaned back in the chair, the firelight dancing across the walls. The world outside had gone silent, the kind of silence that carries the weight of truth. He'd carried me with him all those years, through marriage, through fatherhood, through regret. But why send this now? After all this time, what purpose did this confession serve? Then I noticed something, a faint fold at the bottom of the letter. Another sheet was tucked behind it. My fingers shook as I pulled it free. This one was newer, the ink darker, the paper smoother. At the top, it read, "From Olivia Parker." I froze. My throat went dry. I whispered aloud, "Olivia." It was dated just a month before Daniel's death. "Dear Evelyn, if you're reading this, then Daniel's letter has reached you. I know this may come as a shock, but there's something he wanted me to tell you, something he couldn't say himself. Daniel was sick. For years, he hid it from everyone, even from me. But the truth is, his last wish wasn't for me or for Thomas, it was for you." My eyes stung, the words blurred, but I forced myself to read. "He asked me to find you, to tell you that his happiest memory was the day by the lake, when you told him you'd wait. He said that in your silence, he found peace. He said that even if he couldn't return, he wanted you to live, not mourn." I set the letter down, covering my mouth to keep from sobbing. I could almost hear his voice in the crackle of the fire, calm, loving, familiar. After decades of silence, his truth had finally found me. But Olivia's letter didn't end there. There was one more paragraph, one that would unravel everything I thought I knew. Evelyn, there's something else. Daniel left something behind, not just letters, something that belongs to you. I don't know if I should call it a gift or a burden, but he wanted you to have it, and Thomas knows where to find it. My heartbeat quickened. I reread the line over and over again. Something that belongs to you. What could he have possibly left me? After all these years, what could still tie us together? I stood up, pacing the room, clutching both letters to my chest. The fire hissed softly, as if listening. Outside, the rain began again, gentle, rhythmic, the same way it had fallen the day I met him. I looked at the photograph Thomas had brought me. Daniel's eyes, older now, but still carrying that same impossible kindness, seemed to stare straight through me. I whispered to him, "What did you leave me, Daniel? What truth did you hide?" I turned the letters over, searching for clues, for anything that could make sense. And then I saw it, a small line written in the corner, almost invisible in the dim light. "Ask Thomas about the box beneath the tree." My breath caught. The willow tree. Our tree. The one where it all began. I felt the years melt away. My old heart thudded in my chest with the same wild rhythm it had back then. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. But I knew one thing. I had to go back to the place where love was born, and where perhaps one final truth was waiting to be found. Tomorrow, Evelyn will return to the lake, but what she discovers beneath the willow tree will rewrite everything she believed about her past. And Daniel. Part 3. The box beneath the willow tree. The morning I decided to go back to the lake. The sky was a pale shade of gold, the kind of color that always reminded me of beginnings. The air was still, but heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I hadn't been there in over 40 years, and yet, as the car rolled down that familiar dirt road, I could feel every memory breathing again. Every corner, every turn whispered something from the past. Laughter, footsteps, a young girl's promise. The radio played softly, an old country tune that Daniel and I used to dance to in the kitchen when the world was simple and small. It felt like the universe was leading me back, one note at a time. When I arrived, the lake was exactly as I remembered it, quiet, silver, infinite. The old willow still stood by the edge, its long arms brushing the surface of the water. Time had aged it. The bark cracked, the roots deeper, the branches thinner, but it was still alive, still reaching, still waiting. I stepped out of the car and inhaled. The air smelled like earth after rain and old memories. My cane pressed into the soil as I walked closer, each step heavier than the last. And for the first time in years, I felt like that 19-year-old girl again, barefoot, trembling, and full of impossible dreams. I stopped beside the tree. The trunk bore faint carvings, half erased by time, initials within a heart, D+E. I ran my fingers over them, and my vision blurred. "Hello, Daniel," I whispered. I came back. The wind stirred the branches, almost in reply. I knelt, brushing aside a layer of leaves and roots. The soil was damp, soft. My hands trembled as I dug with the small trowel I'd brought. Each stroke felt like opening an old wound. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, and then I hit something hard. It was a box, wooden, small, and weathered. Its corners were dark with age, and the lock had rusted shut. I stared at it for a long time, afraid to open it, afraid of what truth might lie inside, but I knew that this was what Daniel wanted me to find. My hands shook as I pried it open. Inside was a small bundle wrapped in cloth, yellowed and delicate. I unwrapped it slowly. The first thing I saw was a photograph, a young man in uniform, Daniel, standing beside me, smiling. I gasped softly. That photo had been taken the day before he left for New York, when we swore we'd write every week. But this one was different, because behind us, in the background, stood someone else. Olivia. She wasn't supposed to be there. That day, she had told me she couldn't come, yet here she was, in the shadows, watching. My fingers tightened around the edges of the photo. Something inside me twisted, not anger, not jealousy, but confusion. What did it mean? Why had Daniel kept this? Beneath the photo was a folded piece of paper. I opened it carefully. It was a letter. "Evelyn, if you ever find this, it means the truth has finally reached you. There are things I never told you, not because I wanted to hide them, but because I didn't know how to make them right." My eyes darted over the words. my heart pounding. Olivia knew everything. She knew about us long before I confessed it. But what I didn't know then, what I only discovered much later, is that she wasn't just part of my story. She was part of yours too. I froze. Part of mine. Years before I met you, your father and Olivia's family had a quiet agreement, a business debt, a promise. My father's illness wasn't the only reason I stayed. Evelyn, I stayed because I was already caught in a web that neither of us could escape. My breath trembled. Could it be? Your father owed money to her family. A lot of it. When he passed away, that debt was never settled. Olivia's father used it to ensure our marriage, to keep the families tied, and to keep you away. I didn't know until much later. By then, it was too late. I sat there, my mind spinning, the letter shaking in my hands. So it wasn't just love or duty. It was betrayal stitched into the very fabric of our lives. Evelyn, I tried to fight it, but every time I came close, something happened. A letter lost, a call never received, a visit interrupted. They made sure we never met again. They made sure you hated me. And I let them, because by the time I understood, I was already married, already bound by promises I couldn't break. I pressed the paper to my chest and wept. All those nights I'd blamed him, cursed him under my breath, thought he'd forgotten me, and all along, he was fighting a war I never saw. I read the final paragraph. If you're reading this now, I only ask for one thing. Don't let this story end in bitterness. I know you, Evelyn. I know how strong your heart is. Forgive me, not for what I did, but for what I couldn't undo. And if Thomas ever finds you, tell him the truth. He deserves to know who his father really was, not the man the world saw, but the one who loved you until his last breath. I let the letter fall into my lap. My tears soaked the paper, blending with his ink. I whispered his name over and over again, like a prayer. Daniel, you fool, you beautiful, broken fool. The wind grew stronger, swirling through the willow branches. It carried the scent of rain, and something else. Hope. For the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. I felt seen, heard, loved, even if only through words left behind in a box beneath an old tree. I sat there for hours, reading the letter again and again, until the light faded and the first stars began to appear. And then, as I gathered the papers to leave, something else caught my eye. A smaller envelope, hidden beneath the cloth lining of the box. On it was written, in Daniel's neat, deliberate handwriting, "For Thomas, when he's ready." I froze. A chill ran through me. Why would Daniel hide a letter for his son here, in a place that only I was supposed to find? Did he mean for me to give it to him? Or was it never meant to be found at all? I looked up at the lake. The reflection of the moon rippled across the water like a heartbeat. Something deep inside told me this wasn't over, that Daniel's story had one more truth buried beneath its silence. I held the envelope to my chest, whispering into the night, "I'll find him, Daniel. I'll find Thomas. And I'll finish what you started." The willow swayed gently, its branches bowing low, like a curtain closing on one act, ready for the next. Because the past had finally spoken, but the future was waiting to be answered. In part 4, Evelyn sets out to find Thomas, but what she discovers about him, and what he knows about the past, will change everything she believed about love, loyalty, and fate. Part 4, the letter for Thomas. The letter sat on my lap like a weight from another lifetime. For Thomas, when he's ready. Those words kept echoing in my head as I drove home through the quiet country roads, the willow tree fading in the rearview mirror like a ghost finally freed from its vigil. I didn't sleep that night. The clock ticked endlessly, mocking my restlessness. Every sound in the house, the creak of the floorboards, the sigh of the wind, carried Daniel's voice. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. Thomas deserved to know. He had spent his whole life believing his father was just another businessman, stern, distant, unfeeling. He didn't know the man who wrote poetry on napkins, who played the piano like it could heal wounds, who once swore that love was the only truth worth dying for. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter. The paper had yellowed slightly, its edges curled like something that had waited too long to be touched. My hands trembled as I traced Daniel's handwriting. Still elegant, still precise, even after all these years. I could almost hear his voice reading the words before I opened them, but before I did, I stopped. What if the truth hurt Thomas? What if it destroyed everything he thought he knew about his father, about me? I thought of his life, his wife, his children, the company he'd built, with discipline and fire. He was so much like Daniel, and yet so different, colder, perhaps, because the world had taught him to be. Still, he deserved the truth. I waited until the morning light filled the kitchen, then called him. He didn't answer. So I called again. After the third ring, his voice came steady, polite, distant. Mother, everything all right? I hesitated. How could I begin? Thomas, I found something. Something from your father. Silence, then a short sigh. Mom, it's been decades. Whatever it is, maybe let the past rest. No, I said firmly. You need to see this. He exhaled again, that same weary sound he made when he thought I was being sentimental. All right, I'll come by this weekend. But I couldn't wait that long. By noon, I was in a cab on my way to his house. The driver didn't speak much, and I was grateful. My thoughts were loud enough. When we arrived, I stood at the gate for a moment, staring at the grand house beyond it. Glass, stone, sharp lines, cold, perfect, like him. The maid opened the door, surprised to see me. Mrs. Parker, I'll call Mr. Thomas right away. He appeared moments later, his expression a mix of confusion and impatience. Mother, you should have told me you were coming. I did, I said softly. You just didn't want to listen. He looked at the small box in my hands. What's that? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past him into the living room, all white walls and modern furniture, not a single trace of warmth. I sat down, set the box on the coffee table, and looked at him. Your father left you something? He frowned. My father, he didn't even leave a proper will. What is this? Read it, I said, handing him the envelope. He took it reluctantly, turning it over as if expecting it to vanish. When he saw Daniel's handwriting, he froze. I remember this, he whispered. He used to sign my birthday cards like that. He tore the envelope open, and I watched him read in silence. At first his face was unreadable, calm, focused, analytical. Then came the flicker of disbelief, then anger, and finally, something softer. When he finished, he didn't look at me. He just sat there, the letter trembling slightly in his hand. After a long silence, he said quietly, he knew. I nodded. He did. He stood, pacing. All these years, I thought he left us, that he walked away from you, from me, from everything. But he was protecting us. Yes, my voice broke. And paying debts that weren't even his. Thomas's jaw tightened. He folded the letter carefully and set it back on the table. I don't know what to feel, he said finally. You don't have to know, I replied. You just have to understand. He turned to me then, really looked at me. For the first time in years, his eyes softened. I wish you'd told me sooner. I couldn't, I whispered. I didn't know until yesterday. He sat beside me, his shoulders tense. Then, quietly, what happens now, I think, I said, staring out the window. We find peace. For him, for us, we sat in silence, the air heavy with words unspoken. But peace, like forgiveness, is never simple. That night, after I returned home, my phone rang. It was Thomas. His voice was low, uneasy. Mom, there's something else. You said you found the box under the willow tree, right? Yes, he hesitated. That land, the one by the lake, it's being sold. Some developer bought the whole area. They're tearing it down next week. I froze. What? I thought you should know, he continued. They're starting with the east side near the willow. My heart clenched. That tree, Daniel's letter, the one place that still held him. I couldn't let them destroy it. Thomas, I said, my voice trembling, we have to stop them. Mom, it's too late. The deal's done. No, I whispered. Not yet. There's more buried there. I can feel it. He sighed. You're letting memories blind you. Please, just let the past go. But how could I? The past was all I had left of the man who once promised forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside felt like the earth moving, the echo of machines, the threat of silence. I knew what I had to do. Before dawn, I packed my things again, the old box, the letter, a flashlight, and the small shovel that had unearthed a lifetime. As I left the house, the horizon was just beginning to glow, the faint light of morning kissing the edges of the sky. I whispered to myself, to Daniel, to the ghosts of what once was, I'm coming back, love, one last time. The road to the lake stretched before me like a ribbon of memory, winding, endless, familiar, and though I didn't know what I would find, I knew I couldn't rest until I did, because something told me Daniel's story wasn't finished yet, and neither was mine. In part 5, Evelyn returns to the lake one final time, but what she uncovers beneath the willow will not only rewrite her past, it will reveal the truth Daniel carried to his grave. Part 5. Beneath the willow the night was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with ghosts. Mist rolled over the fields, hurling around the tall grass like breath held too long. The moon hung low, pale and heavy, painting the lake in shades of silver and sorrow. I parked near the old trail where Daniel and I used to meet. The air smelled the same, damp earth, wet leaves, and a faint sweetness of blooming lilies. It was as if time itself had paused to let me in one last time. The willow stood where it always had, older, bent, its branches brushing the surface of the water, like fingers reaching for something lost. Beneath it, the earth still bore the faint outline of the past uneven ground. Scattered petals, the remnants of a promise. I walked closer, my hands trembling. The wind whispered through the leaves, 1,000 voices murmuring his name. Daniel. I knelt, setting the box and the flashlight beside me. The ground was soft from the rain, easy to dig. Each scoop of soil felt like uncovering another memory. The first letter he wrote me, the nights we whispered about running away, the moment I realized I'd lost him. But as the shovel hit something hard, my breath caught. I brushed away the dirt and found another box, older, metal, rusted by time. My heart pounded as I pried it open. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, were photographs, a pocket watch, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Daniel's hand. For a moment, I couldn't move. My fingers hovered over the paper, afraid that touching it would make it vanish. The moonlight flickered through the branches, and I whispered, "If you left me one more secret, I swear I'll never forgive you." Then, I opened it. The letter was long, ink faded but legible. His words trembled on the page, each one soaked in love and regret. "My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then time has finally done what I could not. It has brought you back to where everything began. I know what you must feel. Anger, sorrow, confusion. You have every right. I never wanted to leave. You were my life, my truth, the only thing that ever made sense in a world built on lies. But the truth, Evelyn, it wasn't safe. Not for you, not for our son." I froze. Our son. The world tilted. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. No, that couldn't be right. You must have realized by now. Thomas was never Margaret's child. He was ours. You were told he was born still, but that was the lie that saved him. The family made their choice, reputation over truth. I took him away, raised him as best I could in shadows, and returned him to your father's care when it was safe. They told you he was adopted by relatives, but you always knew, didn't you? Some part of you must have felt it. The way he looked at you, familiar, afraid, searching. I never stopped loving you, Evelyn, and I never stopped loving him. I wanted to tell you both, but the world we lived in didn't forgive love born from defiance. If I could do it all again, I would choose you still, every time. Tears blurred the ink. The page trembled in my hands as the truth settled like thunder in my chest. Thomas, my son, my own flesh and blood. The air felt too thin. I pressed my hand to the earth, steadying myself, as memories flooded back, the way Thomas used to look at me as a child. The inexplicable bond I could never explain. The nights I'd watch him sleep and feel something deeper than maternal affection. All this time, my heart had known what my mind refused to believe. I read the final lines slowly, as if stretching the last breath of him I had left. "If you ever find this, promise me one thing. Tell him the truth. Not for me, but for him. Let him know he was born of love, not sin. And when you see me again, wherever that may be, know that I kept my promise. Always yours, Daniel." I pressed the letter to my chest, sobbing into the dark. The willow swayed above me, as if weeping to Dot when the tears finally stopped. The horizon had begun to glow with the first touch of dawn. I sat there, silent, clutching the truth that had waited decades to be heard, a truth that would change everything. I took out my phone and dialed Thomas. He answered on the third ring, groggy, half asleep. "Mom, it's 5 in the morning. Are you okay?" "No," I whispered, "but I will be. I found something. You need to come here, to the lake." He hesitated. "Now." "Yes, now." When he arrived, the sun was spilling gold across the water. He looked tired, confused, but when I handed him the letter, his face turned pale. He read it slowly, carefully. I watched his hands shake, his eyes flicker with disbelief, pain, and then a dawning recognition. When he finished, he looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "Is it true?" he asked, voice breaking. I nodded. Every word. He sank to his knees beside me, covering his face with his hands. "All this time, and you never knew." "I knew something," I said softly. "A mother always knows. I just didn't understand what it meant." He looked out at the lake, tears glinting in his eyes. "He loved you." "And you," I whispered. "He loved us both." We sat there in silence as the morning light spread over the water. The air smelled of dew and forgiveness. For the first time, I didn't feel the ache of the past, only the warmth of what it had left behind. Thomas reached for my hand and held it tightly. "What do we do now?" I smiled faintly. "We plant another tree. For him, for us." We buried the letter and the watch beneath the willow, sealing the truth where love had once bloomed and broken. As I stood there, I could almost feel Daniel beside me, young, smiling, his hand brushing mine one last time. "Goodbye, my love," I whispered. "You kept your promise." The wind stirred, gentle, carrying his scent, cedar and rain. And for a heartbeat, I wasn't an old woman mourning the past. I was Evelyn again, the girl by the lake, the woman who loved fearlessly, the soul who finally understood that love doesn't end with goodbye. It lingers, it waits, it forgives. And as the sun climbed higher, golden light spilling through the willow branches, I knew this was not an ending, it was peace. Final red hook gives the story ends with Evelyn's peace. But as the wind moves through the willow, a small corner of the buried letter loosens, revealing one more hidden line, unread. "If you're reading this, you were never the only one I wrote